Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. 7 above, what an episode! Gets me hyped, mate! When that theme kicks in, whoosh shit! Super Bowl Sunday has rocked the schedule, so we're back early with our breakdown of episode 4. We get epic speeches and some arm-chilling moments, and this really feels like the calm before the storm. Or well, during it, as we have Rain constantly beating down on Dunk. However, come the dawn, he emerges as a new man and also gains some unlikely allies. Throughout this video, we're going to be going through the episode and also discussing the book alongside it. Anyway, not going to waste any more of your time, let's get into the episode. Now, we open with Dunk locked up in his cell, but still dreaming of the world beyond. Initially, the oppressive walls resemble the stars, and it's something the character often looks up at when falling asleep. This, most notably, is something which he looked up as he slept under his elm tree in episode 1. There, Dunk saw a falling star, which apparently brings good luck to all those who see it. Throughout his life, he's also wondered what it's like living in a house and having a roof over your head. And the transition here is just so symbolic to show how his freedom's now been restricted. The book also touched upon how he hoped to stay in a castle, and it's the first of many be careful what you wished for things that we see throughout the episode. Like, sure, he's staying at a castle, but it's not really in the way that he wanted. I did also wonder if this was intended to resemble a constellation. There's a fair few mentioned in the book, such as the Crown and the Crone's Lantern, and yeah, great slow reveal. As the camera pans down, we come to the realization that Dunk's in his cell and we find him sitting on a stool. I also love how small it is compared to Dunk's large frame. Throughout the season, we've had the constant theme that Dunk's out of place, and this really just adds to that feeling. This moment's the lowest point for the character, and it reminds me a lot of Ned in the main show, as well as when Jon was locked up after killing Dany. We then see the window, which looks a bit different from the illustration in the book. However, the text does talk about it being there and how it's even facing the wrong way, which just makes things worse. We can also see that it's pouring down outside and the storm sort of beats on Dunk throughout the episode. Finally though, it clears up for the day when things seem more helpful. But right now, this sums up the atmosphere. Dunk thinks about how due to the clouds, the armor won't glisten like how it did and everything's lost its shine. The second day of the tourney was overcast with a gusty wind blowing from the west. The crowds should be less on a day like this, Dunk thought. It would have been easier for them to find a spot near the fence to see the jousting up close. Egg might have sat on the rail while I stood behind him. Instead, Egg would have a seat in the viewing box, dressed in silks and furs, while Dunk's view would be limited to the four walls of the tower cell where Lord Ashford's men had confined him. It's all him just realising the glitz and glamour isn't what it was cracked up to be, and everything has basically faded into being shit. The timeline is also a bit different as well. In the novella, as mentioned, it's the second day, and this episode mainly takes place overnight and into the morning. In the book, he also spends all day in the cell, even to the point that he thinks he might just be left there until he dies. But yeah, that's all being condensed down. You know, we've talked in our other breakdowns how they've shifted stuff about, and yeah, it's very shit start to the second day. Dunk then strokes a wet rat, showing how kind he is. He's the kind of guy who always hits the thumbs up, and it's something we've seen with his horses.
Were you talking to your horses? Yeah. That's fucking mad.
In the book, he also worries about what's happened to his horses and hopes Raymond's taking care of Chestnut and Thunder. He then thinks that Egg might have as well, which is when his mind wanders to the reveal. Had a knight ever been made such a fool? Orlin's voice then rattles through his head about how he's Dunk the Lunk and as thick as a castle wall. However, he remembers something that Orlin said which basically inspires the speeches he gives in the episode. A hedge knight is the truest kind of knight, Dunk. The old man had told him a long time ago. Other knights serve the lords who keep them or from whom they hold their lands, but we serve where we will, for men whose causes we believe in. Every knight swears to protect the weak and innocent, but we keep the vow best, I think. He's then soon alerted to the guards and Egg entering the cell. Again, it's a little bit different in the book, as Egg's holding the lantern here as opposed to the guards, and kind of just showing that he's leading the way. The book also talks about the meal he's getting, and it being like a proper feast. There's well-charred meat and a skewer of roast onions, which I think was given by Egg because it's kind of like, sorry mate. However, you might also notice that Dunk's eating with his hand, and the book says that it's because there is the worry that Dunk might use a knife and fork as a weapon. Now Dunk is still shocked that his squire's really a Targaryen, but mate, like, the clues were there. You piece of shit! The guards are then told to leave the food and go, which is similar to the book. Now it might seem dangerous, but Baelor has the measure of Dunk and knows that he's not going to hurt Egg. Dunk then tucks into his food right away, sparing no time, which is like the book, as he didn't realise how hungry he actually was. Egg's clothes are also a bit different here, as he was described as having a Targaryen sigil on his doublet in the book. Here though, it's more in line with the Targaryen dragon riding dress. We saw Dany wear this as her final costume, and Rhaenyra wore it a lot throughout House of the Dragon. It's made for like specifically riding dragons, but its usage here in the show I think it's a bit performative. They obviously need to remind the small folk that they were once powerful and rode dragons, and this is one way to do that. I think it's kind of like when you see the royal family wearing military dress, even though a lot of them have never seen service. It's a big world away from the glorified potato sack that he's worn so far though, and shows the vast difference between the pair. Despite being Dunk's squire, Egg is highborn, wearing fancy clothes and standing over his knight. It shows that despite Dunk's size, he's still smaller than someone who's highborn. Now you wouldn't think Dunk would be able to be alone with the Targaryen again, but yeah. Now Baelor has sent Egg to apologise, which is a line that comes directly from the book and kind of speaks to Baelor's character. Baelor is a very fair man, as we see in the episode, and it's clear that, he doesn't think that people are below him like the other Targaryens do. Dunk asks how many Aegons there have been, as well as asking if it was all a prank bro. Egg says there's been 4, with this making Aegon the 5th, if you will. These are all lines that come from the book though, including the line that he never meant to lie.
I never meant to lie.
Yeah, but you did.
All this stuff about it being some jape to fool a hedge knight, all that stuff comes directly from the book too. Makes this scene feel really authentic, and it's probably the most accurate show that we've had so far.
So why'd you do it? Was it some jape? Make a fool of the stupid hedge knight?
It's at this point Egg explains he was supposed to squire for Darren. However, he's a shit knight, and he wanted to hide until the tourney was over. Egg was still desperate to do this duty though, and in Dunk he saw his best chance to achieve it. Dunk looked at him thoughtfully. He knew what it was like to want something so badly that you would tell a monstrous lie just to get near it. And this might kind of play into how Dunk's not really a knight. Now in the book, Egg explains how once Darren left Summerhall, Darren lost their escort. Egg then explains everything and that they were meant to lay low at the inn. As Dunk says though, it wasn't Darren that made him say he was a stable boy or keep up the ruse longer than he should. This is the angriest that we've seen Dunk so far, and his speech at the end is really, really impassioned. I know the guy was a rugby player before this, and you can often be like, the fucking sportsman can't act, but yeah, the range that he goes through in this episode's really, really incredible, and we just see that anger slowly coming to the surface. At the core of this is a man's dreams who are crushed, and this was also Egg could go an undercover boss. Dunk is then rude to him, and it shows his contempt for the highborn status of Egg.
We can't have the little prince being disappointed now, can we?
Despite everything though, Egg still calls him sir, and Dunk says it's bad luck that they found each other. I mean, yeah, it is bad luck that he's locked up in the cell and has to take part in a trial by combat, but he might make a name for himself after all, and get the glory that he wanted.
Sir Duncan the Tall. 4 pages for Sir Duncan. He must have been quite a man.
So they say.
Sadly, the show does cut out a bit where they kind of talk about living in King's Landing and how different their lives have been. The series does start to hint at this point though that Dunk might not have been knighted, which the book also alludes to, but we'll discuss that in more detail later on. Like the novel, Dunk's then told that Baelor wants to meet him after he's eaten. Dunk doesn't want to wait around though, and to be honest, I'd rather just get it over and done with as well. We then join Baelor in what looks to be a library with him poring over books. In the novel, we're just told it's Lord Ashford's chambers, and the picture's pretty vacant, but I love that they added this here. As we know, he's not only the hand of the king, but is also the next in line, and I'm guessing there's this pressure to be as knowledgeable as possible. Whereas a lot of the Targaryens either hang out at brothels, get drunk all the time, or go around being cruel, Baelor is one of the good ones, and you could say he's got a good egg on his shoulders. Now Dunk's definitely expecting a tense dressing down, or worse, but Baelor just tells him to rise. The Lord even asks Dunk to get him a cup of wine, which is something right out the book. Fire and Blood also goes into how the royals often start off as cupbearers in meetings, and we saw Rhaenyra doing this in episode 1 of House of the Dragon. It's a way they can get used to the councils and also fill out a humble service. Dunk knows that he's gonna be good at it as well, because he's a fucking good squire who intended no harm.
One need not intend harm to do it.
Alright, mate. In the book, Baelor then says he might even done the same thing in his position, and this kind of speaks to why he does what he does at the end. The right thing is tough to do in Westeros though. Dunk was of course right to stop Aerion from hurting Tanzell, but in this world, the gulf in their social status could not be any wider. Both Egg and Dunk have an airy, fairy idea of what's right and wrong, and life as a knight. Egg's upbringing made it so he was blind to class, while Dunk believes that knights will always do the right thing. And we haven't necessarily seen that that's the case. The combined effect of this has led to Dunk being where he is, and there's even a threat that he could have his hand and foot chopped off. Baelor tries to be fair as well, as Aerion wants his head, although in the book he mentions how it's preferably without the teeth, which calls back to the prince having a loosened tooth after the fight. But yeah, Baelor in the book talks about how he talked about them taking his head, but the punch and kick could mean that those limbs have to go. Now the Targaryens in general are just worried about an uprising, so any dissent must be squashed. And it would be terrible if a commoner stood up to a dragon. Right now, there's a lot of people suspecting that they might not be as powerful as they seem, and basically having the idea of what we saw in the play hammered home by a commoner doing this and standing up to a dragon would just make people very uneasy at King's Landing. Egg then blurts out that he wishes Dunk had killed his brother, which is also a line in the text. Beyond that though, kinslaying is one of the biggest sins in Westeros. To kill family said to curse you, and it's why Aemon doing what he did at the end of House of the Dragon Season 1 was seen as such a faux pas. Egg's then dismissed and the pair talk about the punishment. They also can't really trust Egg at the moment, because the guy's been basically lying non-stop for 2 days. Egg will tell him, I have no doubt, said Prince Baelor, but the boy has been known to lie too, as you have good reason to recall. Which son will my brother believe? As for the matter of these puppeteers, by the time Aerion's done twisting the tale, it will be high treason.
It will be high treason.
Treason.
The dragon is the sigil of the royal house. To betray one being slain, sawdust, blood spilling from its neck, well, it's doubtless innocent, but it was far from wise. Aerion calls it a veiled attack on House Targaryen, an incitement to revolt. Maekar will likely agree.
A veiled attack on House Targaryen, an incitement to revolt.
In the book, we then actually get insight into Dunk's thoughts, as the words won't escape his mouth. "Aye," said Dunk, "aye, your grace, aye. They meant no treason, it was only a wooden dragon. It was never meant to be a royal prince," he wanted to say, but his words had deserted him once and all. He had never been any good with words. Baelor then asks Dunk how good of a fighter that he is. He's going to need to be, as another charge of kidnapping is about to be added to Dunk's rap sheet. Darren lied to his father by saying that Dunk stole Egg from the inn they were staying at, so now he's on the hook for that as well. In the book, Darren actually appears at the hall and the whole trial thing, and later japes he'd been looking for Egg at the bottom of his wine cart. And honestly, yeah, if you don't hate the Targaryens enough at this point, burn them all! Baelor understands though that they rule the house based on their history, and it's the sons like Darren and the awfully entitled ones like Aerion that will cause their house's downfall. Dunk then gives a rousing speech that's new for the show, with him talking about knights doing the right thing. It's all something that comes full circle at the end, and it is such a great moment. Dunk is then taken to his trial while Aerion just sits there and obnoxiously eats nuts. Again, Darren's there in the book, but I do actually prefer that they saved his return for the tent scene. Maekar also looks visibly disgusted at his son, and they're kind of turning the house into a spectacle. It's at this point that Dunk then demands trial by combat. We have of course seen them in the series before, and Tyrion famously had one in the main show. Also love how the Ashfords are pushed down the bottom of the table, and we get some hilarious moments with them picking things off the floor. Everyone fucking hates the Targaryens, but like we see here, no one's willing to stand up to them. Aerion then refuses the trial by combat, which angers his father. He's a total coward despite being trained by the best of the best of the best, sir. He's scared of a simple hedge knight who grew up in Flea Bottom and thus goes for a trial of the 7 for a number of different reasons. If 6 knights fail to join, then he's cast as guilty, but even if they do, Aerion's gonna have better fighters on his side. The book explains how the king's god have taken an oath to protect the royals, and thus he'll immediately have these knights in the ranks. The novel also explains that luckily the best are at King's Landing protecting the king, but still there's some quite good fighters here. Aerion seems to relish this technical win over Dunk though, as there hasn't been a trial of the 7 since 42 AC. Lionel even says in the book that it's been 100 years since the last one. Most have no idea what it is. Now, the Andals believe that if there was 14 knights in a game of life and death, then it was more likely than not that the gods would punish the guilty party.
Well, if it was the Andals.
Like, the whole thing is such a spectacle that they may even arrive and take part. They do sort of change up the scene, as in the book, Maekar knows what the trial is, and Aerion in the show basically takes his father's lines there. Dunk is also very at his depth, and Maekar is furious. He asks if his son's hiding behind this technicality because he's afraid. His excuse to his father, though, is that Darren has been apparently slighted and also needs to get justice. In the book, Darren later renounces his claim against Duncan, but there was still a one from Aerion, so the fight still goes ahead. However, this is why the drunken prince is then forced to join Aerion's side. Darren's charges being a lie kind of also foreshadows the end of the trial as well, which is something we will talk about in the spoiler section. He then goads his father by bringing up the topic of honour. This is something his dad knows all about as he took part in the Blackfire Rebellion. In this scene, Aerion's just a total dickhead, and the nut-smashing thing just completely shows his arrogance. At this point, no one really believes they can do anything against the Targaryens, but we are starting to see those seeds of dissent popping up amongst the people. I think as well as an audience, we've kind of been sold like the Targaryens kind of being lovable anti-heroes in a way. Like Egg is difficult to hate, but even in the main show, I think Dany was pretty much always presented as likable, and even when she went bad, people just seen it as being out of character. Because she's so nice, like that little egg. House of the Dragon, though, that definitely whitewashes the Targaryens. And in the book, it's a lot more balanced, whereas the show just has, like, Rhaenyra and co being the nice side, even though Daemon's having kids murdered in their beds. We obviously have heard about the Mad King as well, but it's rare that we get massive scenes with Targaryens who are just being complete dickheads, especially just like this. So I love this performance. Dunk also needs to find 6 other blokes to fight and potentially die for him, and considering the first part of the season was people saying they didn't even know about Sir Arlen, it is going to be hard, but he has to do this or he will be found guilty. It's like some sort of medieval Survivor series. Baelor then shoots his nephew a disgusting look, and Mako grabs him and calls him an idiot. Also love how Lord Ashford bangs his head and is kneeling, showing how desperate he is to climb the ranks. Bro is in so much debt that he'd even need to go on Sir Caleb of Hammer. Returning to the Elm Tree in the Rain, though, it's a far cry from the glorious UK weather that we've seen in the previous episodes. Dunk had never felt so alone as he did when he walked out of the gates of Ashford Castle and heard the portcullis rattle down behind him. A soft rain was falling, light as dew on his skin, and yet he shivered at the touch of it. Across the river, coloured rings haloed the scant few pavilions where fires still burned. The night was half gone, yes. Dawn would be on him in a few hours, and with dawn comes death. The book also has him thinking as well that they might as well have just told him to get 6,000 knights because he's got no fucking chance of getting 6. It's hopeless. He also contemplates fleeing, but realises he'd rather die a knight than live as an outlaw. It's here that he then returns to Chestnut and Thunder. In the book, the horses were already at the Fossaway Pavilion, but I think it works better just dramatically having them here in the rain. It's a very, very sad scene. Just like the book, Raymond then reminds poor Dunk just how bad the situation is, as real lances and more will be used.
Duncan, that means battle axes, morning stars and lances of war.
Stefan then reminds his cousin that he's just a squire and has no skin in the game, but the riper apple chooses to fight for Dunk. But yeah, at this point in the book, Stefan even calls him Raymond the Reluctant. New for the show is also Stefan's rant about how the Targaryens are colonizers. He also seems like a really nice guy and even echoes Dunk's words from before.
All knights vow to protect the innocent.
Now, the Fossaways were in Westeros before the Targaryens arrived and will likely be there long after they're gone. Which yeah, is right, as he fought in the wars in the main series. He then also asks where their dragons are. It's just like Raymond's outburst earlier in the season, and clearly a sentiment shared amongst the family. To them, these dickheads came in with dragons, forced their laws upon everyone, and subjugated the entire land. Aegon is kind of basically Aegon the Conqueror, and these Westery are the Anglo-Saxon. Stefan at this point seems virtuous though, and he asks why tragedy so oft follows honourable men. However, as we learn, his rebellious chatter and talk of honour is all bluster as he bends the knee for a lordship. This was foreshadowed last week as well, when Raymond said he was far from chivalrous. Darren in the book at one point also says, Dunk counted on his fingers. That makes 6. Who is the 7th man? Prince Darren shrugged. Aerion will find someone if he needs be. He will buy a champion. He has no lack of gold, which foreshadows the bribery afoot. At this point though, Stefan says he knows people that he can recruit for the team. In the book, he then mentions Lionel, Lord Lannister and Ser Otho. We never actually had met Lionel in the book before this point, and then he just randomly showed up at the tournament. So I did appreciate that the show handled things differently and actually introduced the character before he just shows up ready to die for Dunk, who he's never met. Stefan is very intense in these parts though, and a part of me did even think they were changing things up from the book. However,
I fight with Prince Aerion and the accusers.
in the book, Raymond was also unsure whether his cousin could get them on his side. Dunk then says that he thinks that this is God's punishment. He thinks this is all happening because he didn't know his place. To hint that maybe he wasn't actually knighted by Sir Arlen and just made it up and tied it in with the Robin story. Which, In episode 1, Dunk did say that Arlen always meant for him to be a knight, but we did see that he was silent in the flashback. Later on, he also hesitates when he has to knight Raymond, as deep down, I think he knows that this wouldn't be legitimate, which then leads Lionel to doing it for him. Arlen also then shrugs in a flashback to Dunk's own knighting, which seems a bit suspect. So while I never suspected it in the book, I feel like the show is leaning into the idea that Dunk was never actually dubbed by Sir Arlen. They're then interrupted by Egg, who's come to say that he will still squire for him. The reunion turns very sour very quickly though, as Darren comes in as well. I much prefer how it's handled in the show though, yeah, because it's weird seeing him at the table and then having Dunk give this massive reaction to seeing him again when he'd already know that he'd already seen him through the day. Not content with attacking just one prince, he then holds a knife to the throat of Darren and implies that he'll stab him in the neck. It is different to the book, as Zeri said he might stab him in the belly, and we are being thorough. He's very cowardly, just like Aerion though, and a total waste of space. Did make me laugh as well how Dunk says,
They can't kill me twice.
Now while Makor is joining the accusers to try and win some honour back, Darren's dishonourably taking a fall. It's kind of building off the match fixing from last time, but we see a big difference in Dunk. There he was against it, whereas he's seen the shades of grey now and is willing to accept it. It's here that they also touch upon the King's God. And Dunk is quite literally royally fucked. Aegon is happy for Aerion to die though, as Makor will be well protected and Darren is taking a fall. So Dunk at least stands a chance. In the book though, he thinks how Darren might be playing him and this could be another Targaryen trick. They then touch upon the past and what Aerion used to do to Aegon, which is straight from the book. And Aerion, I remember when I was little, used to come into my bedchamber at night and put his knife between my legs. He had too many brothers, he'd say. Maybe one night he'd make me a sister, then he could marry me. Yeah, it is pretty funny to be fair. Even through Egg's cat in the well as well, apparently. The guy's a fucking dickhead in a nutcase, and Aerion believing he's a dragon in human form could also be something else that we will talk about in the spoiler section. But yeah, as we know, the Targaryens have this generational madness, and this is why he was so offended by the play.
A pity he wasn't born a Fossaway. Then he'd think himself an apple. We'd all be a deal safer.
Darren then asks Dunk for a private word, and he then explains his dreams. He has the Targaryen trait of visions, while Aerion has the cruelty. Now visions are a big part of the story, and it was Daenys the Dreamer who predicted the fall of Valyria. You also have Aegon's dream, which has been passed from king to king. Helena predicted a lot of things in House of the Dragon, and Darren is cursed with his sight as well. We even had the vision last week, and shoutouts to everyone who pointed out the birthmark on the face of the seer, which could be a nod to the three-eyed raven, which we will talk about more in the spoiler section. Darren then says that in the dream, a great big dragon fell on Dunk, and the beast was dead, but Dunk was still alive.
Did I kill it?
That I could not say.
Darren then mentions how they used to be masters of the dragon, but they're all gone. Again, this vision, major foreshadowing that we'll discuss in the spoiler section, especially as it works twofold. Despite being a waste of space though, Darren doesn't want to die just yet and apologises if he's killed Dunk with his lie. He also touches upon being damned to some kind of hell with likely no wine, which is a line directly from the novel. Dunk then heads towards the puppet show tent, which is in disarray since the scuffle. He recalls the play with Tanzel, saying, "You are no knight." This once again highlights that Dunk may have not actually been knighted. In the book, he just looked at the space where the puppeteer's wagon was, but I love this bit of subtext. He then looks at the severed head of Florian the Fool. Dunk is kind of Florian the Fool himself, as both were not of high birth and had tatty mixed clothes. This scene also visually looks a lot like the legendary lines in Hamlet. In it, Hamlet is holding the skull of his father's former jester, and it works here as the Fool is another name for a jester. Here Dunk is lamenting the loss of his crush though, and in the book he's also worried that he's lost his shield, but luckily she left it with Pate. The book then says that he can spot his wagon instantly as it has the sword and anvil, which makes it easy to distinguish. They then sit in his wagon just like the book. Dunk asks where Tanzel went, and Pate mentions that they left for Dawn. In the book, it's also explained that her uncle didn't want her to see Dunk die, and Pate says, well gone is well forgot. This is basically playing upon how the dragons may forget about her, but that she may also forget about Dunk eventually and be spared the pain of seeing her hero die. Pate then gets the shield out, which is expertly painted and has far more detail than a sigil usually has. Pate's also replaced the steel around the shield and added straps, all for the low price of a copper. Dunk then says that it's painted up like death, and in the book he thinks about how it looks like the stars falling, so it's a bad omen. However, Pate says the elm tree's still alive, and the shooting star of course brings good luck. Does it? Does it really? Because his life's fucking ruined. In the book though, he does think he should have stuck with the chalice, as that had wings. Pate then talks about how it'll be heavier but stronger, which is also a line from the novel.
Oaken iron, guard me well, or else I'm dead and doomed to hell.
This rhyme is also something that Arlen taught Dunk, and in the book it stirs up memories of the old man. Dunk then departs for the tourney grounds, and the rain has faded to usher in some hope. The book even shows this change by highlighting that all the rain had stopped. Now, missing from the show are the small folk who come up to wish Dunk luck, and it kind of plays into how everyone hates the Dragon Lords. They were impressed with him though, and how he was a knight who remembered his vows and basically stood up for them while others wouldn't have. An old man stepped up to take his hand and said, "May the gods give you strength, sir." Then a begging brother in a tattered brown robe said a blessing on his sword, and a maid kissed his cheek. "They are for me." "Why?" he asked Pate. "What am I to them?" "A knight who remembers his vows," the smith said. They basically help him armor up, and if you want to upgrade your wardrobe, mate, then why not check out our merch store right below the video. There we have a whole host of Knight of the Seven Kingdom inspired shirts, including our swords one, dragon one, and a lot more. We also have Fallout inspired stuff as well, and the more you buy, the more of a discount that you get. Now we then see Sir Humphrey Harding, Robin Risling, Humphrey Beesbury, and Lionel Baratheon, you bastard, waiting for him to come. "Oh, you bastard, Ned. Oh, you bastard." Dunk then thanks him for coming, and Humphrey says that the debt is Aerion's and they've come to collect it. Both Humphreys have turned up as well as their brother by marriage, which it gets very confusing, I can imagine. "George, mate, you need to learn some new fucking names. I'm sick of everyone being called Aerion or Humphrey or some shit." The line about the broken leg is also straight from the text, but he's got to stay on his horse the whole fight, if that's even possible. Robin's lines are new for the show though, and they play off the scene last week with Egg. He says how he'd usually die a king's servant, but when the crown goes against the gods, that's when he has to go against the crown. He's very pious and would probably join up with the Fate Militant if he was born in another time. Now we learn that it's Egg who's brought these lords, not Sir Stefan, as Lionel explains.
The fuck is Sir Stevron?
As Raymond mentions in the book, the lords are unlikely to know who Stefan is. He doesn't really have the friends he says he does and wouldn't have been able to get them. By the sounds of it as well, he didn't even try and probably just went straight to make the deal instead. Just like the book, Lionel then explains that there hasn't been a trial of the Seven for 100 years, and this is the chance to put his name in the history books. He hasn't really had the chance to prove himself, and it all kind of plays off his speech at the party. The houses, in general, are like they're all kind of in this weird place at the moment, where everything's peaceful, but they desperately crave death and battle. Glory, dying, fighting, that's the only way people get remembered, and people obviously don't sing songs about how boring that someone was, or how you made a great YouTube breakdown that day. But this trial of the Seven could be something that people remember. We then see Dunk face the small folk audience. Aerion and his father then arrive in the finest armour. A roar went up from the crowd. At the north end of the meadows, a column of knights came trotting out the river mist. The three kings' god came first, like ghosts in their gleaming white enamel armour, long white cloaks trailing behind them. Even their shields were white, blank and clean as a field of new fallen snow. Behind rode Prince Maker and his sons. Now in the book, they then talk about how there's only 6 and wonder if Aerion's not been able to make up his 7. Stefan arrives though, and yeah, you're like, oh, nice one, Stefan's here, but then quickly realise that he's become the accuser's 7th. Now he's a fucking dickhead, hate the lad, never hits a thumbs up, and his words here are laid out a bit differently in the book. "I shall be more than that before this day is done. Lord Fossaway, I like the sound of that." There he just switches sides and says he has allegiance to his lord before later saying that Lord Fossaway sounds good. Yet the backroom deal is more explicitly talked about, and he taunts everyone a lot more. His armor also looks really cool, with it being adorned with apples and branches. Raymond is shocked though and says,
You traded your honor for a lordship.
Stefan, of course, fucking hates the Targaryens, but the reality of the situation is that, like it or not, they're in charge in time to lick some boots. The Dragon Lord, of course, needed more men, so Stefan saw an opportunity and took it. At some point, Cider Hall also lost its lordship, and Stefan intended to restore it via this deal. Raymond is furious though and tells his cousin he has to get his horse himself and then asks to be knighted, which are both moments that come from the book. As Lionel says,
Any knight can make a knight.
But yeah, Dunk's hesitation here makes it seem like he isn't a knight and thus cannot make a knight. If he knighted Raymond and that was then exposed somehow, then he's really screwed over his new friend. Either way though, Raymond does become a knight, however, this is through Lionel. And I bet it's not the first time a Baratheon's had someone on their knees while they're waving their sword in their face. Ooh, Bessie! Ooh, Ned, you bastard! Ooh, Bessie, Bessie! Lovely tits, Bessie! Ah! Get out, Robin! Ah! Whew, Jesus, he nearly took over me forever there. This creates a new house though, which is House Fossaway of the New Barrel. Now to differentiate himself from Stefan, Raymond opts to have a green apple on his armband for his sigil. This plays on the fact that Stefan kept saying he was still green, and it also subtly plays into him still being ripe and this being his first real challenge. I love the knighting scene though, and this is possibly one of the coldest scenes I think I've ever seen in Game of Thrones. The music, voiceover, and slow motion really makes it a cut above the rest. It was like this the whole time. I love the cut between Raymond and then Dunk imagining it's Orlin knighting him, and Orlin kind of shrugs as Dunk hasn't been knighted. Again, it's kind of the idea of being careful what you wish for, as he wanted to be a knight and have glory on the battlefield, but not like these. Not like these. Dunk then meets Lord Ashford and talks about how he's one person short for the trial. But this means we can get an insanely cool speech as Dunk addresses the knights. We see Gwyn, who looks down, and Dunk once again mentions Sarlin of Pennytree. He appeals to the good honour and explains that knights defend the innocent and says that's just what he did.
I was not Sir Erlen's blood, but I have followed his example, as your sons will follow yours.
Cuts to the crowd and we see what I think are Tybolt and Daemon Lannister due to their red and black clothes adorned with gold. Then some people are in gold colours specifically, one of which I think might be Lord Karen. In the book, Dunk directly addresses the Lords and Knights by name when trying to get someone else to join them, and he basically calls out all the great houses, and it kind of plays into how they don't really have honour. Everyone just sits there awkwardly before a dude then gets up and rips one hell of a fart. And that's my review of Ryan Airy. Nah, but this might be Sir Otho Bracken. This is because in the book, he's the only lord or knight to respond to Dunk before the next part of the Hedge Knight's appeal. He's a lot more classier than this though, but yeah, I appreciate that being the response. Dunk then says that his cause is just, and Otho basically says, yeah, that's a you problem, mate. This then angers Dunk though, who says,
And there no true knight among you!
Reminds me a lot of Tyrion Lannister's speech at the Battle of Blackwater Bay.
They say I am half a man. But what does that make the lot of you?
We then see one of the ladies of the night named Red. Maybe you should have listened to her advice, mate. These lords and knights, they think nothing of you. The crowd are all cracking up as well, the fart still, and all seems lost, but finally the gate opens and in comes a knight finally. And I bet they were like, that's gotta be canned! In the book, Dunk actually thought it was Baelor due to the knight wearing his armour. However, Baelor reveals that he didn't bring his armour and thus has to borrow his son's. And I'll tell you what, mate, when the music kicked in, I started going mental. Turned up like fucking Stone Cold Steve Austin. Woo! Absolutely love how the theme kicks in though, as the show started with a bait and switch as it hit in the first episode. They saved it for this though, and just Dunk kicking the horse and then cutting to credits here is so good. He's now got his own heroic moment, which is underscored by the theme playing in full, and crank it the fuck up as we go to the credits. Baelor then says,
This man protected the innocent, as every true knight must. Let the gods decide if he was right or wrong.
Baelor knows that the Targaryens only rule due to their history of having the blood of the dragon. Now though, there are no dragons, so they must be careful. Aegon wiped out Harrenhal, and House of the Dragon showed us just how powerful the dragons are, and once the dragons returned to Westeros in the main show, they became immensely feared once more. But at the moment, they could be defeated by an army just like any other house. So Baelor Breakspear has decided to show the realm that there's still some good left in the world, and they can trust them as their leader because they're so nice. In the book, he also has wings on his helmet similar to Daemon and House of the Dragon at the tourney in Season 1. You could even argue that this moment causes the events that transpire in the main series. Overall though, it's a great episode, and I've seen people like complaining about the episode's length. But we need to remember, the novella is only about 110 pages long, maybe longer with the illustrations, but not very long when you go by the word count. And I did even think that this could have been a movie. However, I think the writers have done a great job of turning this into fantastic episodic television. Now, I do think it's going to be a fair bit before we see the final fight, unfortunately. We know that there's 2 episodes left, and know from the trailers that we are getting a flashback episode. So I don't know if they're going to show that for the finale, and I think more than likely that it's going to arrive next week. As of making this video, I haven't seen the trailer for the next episode yet, but we might be over 2 weeks away until the actual showdown due to this airing on a Friday. Either way though, that's it for the spoiler-free stuff, and if you've either read the book or just are desperate to know some of the reveals, then the next part of the video is for you. Also, turn off now if you don't want to know, because there will be spoilers, heavy spoilers. Now, the vision is of course a major spoiler, and in the episode, Darren said, "A great beast with wings so large they could cover this meadow, it had fallen on top of you." Dunk then asks whether he killed it, which is ambiguous for a reason. In the book, Dunk wins the trial and forces Aerion to rescind the accusation, so it's a massive victory, But there is a little bit of sweeter moment. During the fight, Maekor struck his brother's head, and Baelor's helmet was basically just holding the whole thing together. Pate then removed it, and basically his head was completely crushed, and then he fell into Dunk, which proves that Darren's dream was correct. Baelor the dragon was dead on top of Dunk in the end, and the dragon died in a meadow just like this. But yeah, did Dunk kill him? Well, technically not from a certain point of view, but pulling him into this is what killed the character. But yeah, seeing all this shit as well, I think it kind of explains why Darren drank so much. Naturally, Baelor dying also destroys Baelor, and he says how his father would have been a great king. Baelor, or Baelor, however you pronounce it, he also dies the same year as the season takes place. Thus, the Iron Throne then ends up towards Aegon's lineage. We then end up with the Mad King being slain, Jon Snow being born, Daenerys getting the dragon eggs, and lots of things basically come out from this history-changing moment. Egg at one point in the episode also says,
"He thinks he's a dragon in human form. That's why he was so wroth at the puppet show."
Now this is a very interesting line for two reasons. Firstly, it refers to how Aerion dies in the book. Believing he could actually turn into a dragon, the prince drinks wildfire and dies a horrible and painful death. Yay! It is somewhat of a Targaryen obsession, and it is rumoured that Aegon himself used it to try and hatch the dragon eggs at Summerhall. This then led to him dying, which plays off the prediction from last time, and Dunk also apparently died in this as well. Though I do wonder if the show will play things beyond that and have them basically going off to go and live happy lives amongst the common folk. That's just me coping, but this sort of thing has happened before. But yeah, the use of magic and wildfire ended up wiping out a lot of the Targaryen line and was a pivotal moment in the history of Westeros. One thing that was also spotted as well that we kind of touched upon before but need to expand here was how the fortune teller woman looks to have a wine-stained birthmark. Fans have pointed out that this might somehow be connected to Brynden Rivers. Now in the book, he was actually one of Aegon IV's bastards. He was a ruthless spy master akin to Viserys or even Littlefinger. During the first Blackfyre Rebellion, he was loyal to Darren II and eventually became the Hand of the King and also the Master of Whispers. However, after the third Blackfyre Rebellion and Maker's death, a great council was called to discuss who should sit on the Iron Throne. Safe passage was promised to one of Daemon I's Blackfyre sons, only for Brynden to execute him. Once Egg was made the king, he then sent Brynden to take the Black of the Night's Watch, and he became the Lord Commander, but then disappeared beyond the wall. As we learned, he was a three-eyed crow, or raven in the show. So, at a total reach, this could be the Lord Bloodraven walking while in the past, or passing on a message to the past, but probably not. However, it's also important to note that this is actually the same actress as the innkeeper in episode 1, so it definitely feels like someone may be possessing her. But that's it for the video anyway. Please drop a like, leave a comment with all your thoughts below, and if you want to check us out on Instagram and keep up to date with what we're doing over the weekend now, then make sure you check us out at Heavy Spoilers. As always, we have our early videos for members. There is one going out tomorrow, American Psycho, and In the Mouth of Madness is now out for members, so if you're interested in seeing either of those film breakdowns early, then click the join button and pay just 99 cents a month. If not though, thank you so much for sitting through this video, really means a lot. I will see you next Sunday. I believe I said that last time and then they announced it was Friday. So yeah, who knows what's going to happen now, but it will be just over a week until I see you guys again if you're following this series. But thank you for all your support as always. Anyway, with that out of the way, you take care of yourself, mate. Peace.